For more than a century, this dog has stood for one specific idea in the English-speaking world: toughness. Stubborn, unshakable, impossible to push around. The Bulldog spirit, the phrase people reach for when they want to describe grit that refuses to quit. Winston Churchill posed for photographs with one beside him during the darkest months of the Second World War, precisely because the image did the talking for him. And the breed has appeared on regimental crests, recruitment posters, and national mascots for generations, always standing in for the same idea of an animal too stubborn to ever back down. And yet the actual living animal behind that symbol spends much of its life snoring while awake, overheating on a mild afternoon walk, and in a disturbingly large share of cases, unable to give birth without a surgeon's help. Why does the breed built to represent toughness turn out to be, underneath the legend, one of the most physically compromised dogs in the entire species? That gap between the symbol and the body is the whole story here. First, the sound everyone mistakes for personality. Bulldog owners describe the snorting, the snoring, the constant low rattle of breath as charming, almost a signature feature of the breed's character. Veterinarians describe the same sounds with a different word: obstruction. The flat face that defines the breed compresses the entire airway into a fraction of the space a longer muzzled dog has available. Nostrils are frequently narrowed almost to slits, a condition called stenotic nares. The soft palate at the back of the throat is often too long for the shortened skull, partially blocking the airway with every breath. The windpipe itself, in many individuals, is measurably narrower than it should be for an animal that size. Veterinary medicine has a name for the combination: brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome. And a startlingly high percentage of bulldogs live with some degree of it for their entire lives. The sound people call cute is, more often than not, the sound of an animal working hard just to move air in and out of its own body. The same restricted airway shows up in less obvious ways, too. Many bulldogs experience something resembling sleep apnea, repeatedly waking slightly through the night, because their airway partially collapses the moment their throat muscles relax. Exercise that would barely register for most dogs their size, a short jog, a few minutes of fetch, can leave a bulldog gasping, because the breed simply cannot move enough air fast enough to keep up with the oxygen demand. None of this is rare or unlucky. For a large share of the breed, it is closer to the baseline experience of being alive, inside that particular skull shape. Second, the part where the flat face actually made sense. This skull shape did not begin as a cosmetic choice. The breed's original job, dating back centuries in England, was bull baiting, a blood sport in which dogs were bred and trained to charge a tethered bull, clamp onto its nose, and hold on regardless of what the animal did to shake them loose. Entire towns built public events and even legal requirements around the sport at various points, with butchers in some regions expected to have their bulls baited before slaughter, supposedly to tenderize the meat, though the spectacle itself was the real draw for most of the crowd watching. A long muzzle is a liability in that job. It gets in the way of a tight, sustained bite. A pushed-back nose, set further from the jaw, let the dog keep breathing through its nostrils even while its mouth was locked onto the bull's face for an extended fight. The flat face was once a functional engineering solution to a specific, brutal problem. It was never meant to be the entire point of the animal. It was meant to be balanced by a body that could still breathe, run, and fight, without collapsing from heat in the process. Third, the turn. Bull baiting was outlawed in England in 1835 under new animal cruelty legislation, and almost overnight the bulldog lost the job that had justified its existence for generations. Breeders did not let the breed disappear. They reinvented it as a companion and show animal, and over the following decades, selection pressure shifted entirely toward appearance. Without the original sport demanding a dog capable of real physical exertion, nothing was holding the extreme traits in check anymore. Each generation of show breeding pushed the face flatter, the body stockier, the proportions more extreme, optimizing purely for a look the public found endearing, with no functional requirement left to push back against it. The bulldog people know today is not really a relic of the bull ring. It is a relic of more than a century of beauty contests with no counterweight at all. Fourth, the number that should stop anyone scrolling. Studies and veterinary surveys estimate that a large majority of English Bulldog litters, commonly cited in the range of 70 to 80% or higher, require a cesarean section because the puppies' heads, bred wide and large to match the adult skull shape, are too big to safely pass through the mother's birth canal. This is not an occasional complication. For an enormous share of bulldogs, natural birth is not realistically an option at all, and the irony compounds itself in the operating room. The same restricted airway that defines the breed also makes bulldogs a higher anesthetic risk than most dogs their size, meaning the surgery routinely required just to deliver bulldog puppies safely is itself complicated by the very trait making that surgery necessary in the first place. An entire breed has been shaped to the point where its own reproduction depends on a surgical procedure that the breed's own anatomy makes harder to perform safely. Fifth, the heat problem nobody plans for until it is too late. Dogs cool themselves primarily by panting, moving air rapidly across the tongue and the moist tissue of the airway to release heat. A bulldog's obstructed airway makes that process measurably less efficient, which means the breed overheats faster, at lower temperatures, than most other dogs of similar size. Multiple airlines restrict or outright refuse to transport bulldogs and other flat-faced breeds in cargo holds, citing disproportionately high rates of death and injury during flights compared to other breeds. A dog built to look unshakable can be brought down by a warm afternoon that most other breeds would barely notice. Sixth, the trap built into the bloodline itself. Genetic studies examining the breed have found notably reduced genetic diversity compared to most other dog breeds, the inherited result of a relatively small founding population combined with decades of selecting heavily for the same narrow set of cosmetic traits. Reduced genetic diversity does not just mean less variety. It means health problems linked to those traits are harder to breed away from, because so much of the available gene pool already carries the same underlying issues. The problem compounds itself through what breeders call the popular sire effect. When one particularly admired show dog is used for an outsized share of breeding across an entire generation, his genetics, including whatever hidden health liabilities he carries, spread disproportionately through the whole population, narrowing the gene pool even further with every passing decade. Even well-meaning breeders working to improve the breed's health are, in a very real sense, working with a smaller toolbox than almost any other breed offers. All of this adds up in a number that rarely makes it into a sales listing. Average bulldog lifespans commonly fall in the range of 8 to 10 years, noticeably shorter than many other breeds of similar size, with breathing complications, heart strain from chronic low oxygen, and skin infections in the deep facial folds among the recurring causes. A dog bred to look unbreakable, in practice, often does not get the same number of years that less extreme-looking breeds its size routinely enjoy. Seventh, the reckoning that has already started. In 2019, the Netherlands introduced regulations restricting the breeding of dogs with the most extreme flat-faced proportion, English Bulldogs prominent among them, citing animal welfare concerns directly tied to breathing difficulty, and giving breeders a measurable muzzle length threshold to meet, rather than a vague suggestion. In 2022, a court ruling in Norway went further, finding that breeding English Bulldogs and a handful of other heavily compromised breeds in their current standard form violated the country's animal welfare law, a decision that sent ripples through breed clubs and veterinary associations well beyond Norway's borders. These are not fringe opinions from people who dislike the breed. They are formal, regulatory, and legal conclusions in more than one country that the modern Bulldog's body itself has crossed a line worth intervening over, and several other European countries have since opened their own reviews of brachycephalic breeding standards in response. 8th, the part with an actual exit. A small but growing movement of breeders working under banners like health-focused Bulldog programs has spent years deliberately reintroducing slightly longer muzzles, more open nostril, and leaner proportions, sometimes by carefully crossing back in genetics from related breeds, specifically to restore breathing function without abandoning the breed's core identity. Major kennel clubs in some countries have revised their official breed standards in recent years to explicitly require visible, open nostrils and discourage judges from rewarding the most extreme, breathing-compromised dogs in the show ring, shifting the incentive structure of competitive showing itself, even if slowly. Veterinary respiratory function grading schemes have also started appearing at some shows and health screenings, scoring dogs on an objective breathing test, rather than relying purely on how flat the face looks to a judge's eye, giving prospective puppy buyers an actual data point to ask a breeder for before committing to a litter. None of this has fixed the breed overnight, and plenty of breeders still prioritize the flattest face possible. But for the first time in a long time, the incentives are not pointing in only one direction anymore. 9th, the reframe nobody wants to hear at a dog show. The Bulldog earned its symbolism honestly, in a sport that no longer exists, defending against an animal many times its size, with nothing but its jaw and its nerve. What happened afterward was not malice. It was more than 100 years of humans loving a face so much that almost nobody noticed how far it had drifted from a body that could comfortably support it. The toughness was real once. What survived it is a dog that, in far too many cases, has to fight just to breathe normally on an ordinary afternoon, wearing a reputation for resilience that its own airway can no longer fully back up. None of this means the breed should disappear, and none of it makes the affection people feel for these dogs irrational. It only means that affection now comes with a responsibility the breed's early fans never had to think about. Choosing a breeder working to widen those nostrils and lengthen that palate, instead of one chasing the flattest face the show ring will still reward. The next time someone calls a Bulldog's snore endearing, listen to it again and ask whether that sound belongs to a relaxed dog or a dog working harder than it should have to, just to do something every other breed manages without a second thought.